Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. My name is the Reverend Dina McFeeters, and I'm honored to serve as Associate Minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, histories, ethnicities, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all that you are bringing with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. I'm honored to introduce our pulpit guest today, the Reverend Rebecca Hines. Originally from Duluth, Minnesota, Reverend Rebecca is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. She has a bachelor's degree in cultural studies and comparative literature from the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, a Master of Divinity from Andover Newton Theological School in Newton, Massachusetts, and was ordained to the ministry in 2014. Rebecca currently lives in Cedar Rapids, Iowa with her wife and daughter, where she is in her 5th year serving as the developmental minister of People's Church Unitarian Universalist. Welcome, Rebecca. It's good to have you with us today. Finally, I welcome all of us to our worship service by inviting everyone to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Let's go to our beloved sanctuary for the lighting of the flaming chalice, a symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Come One, Come All by Ian W. Riddell. Come one, come all. Come with your missing pieces and your extra screws. Come with your hard edges and your soft spots. Come with your bowed heads and your upright spines. Come, all you flamboyant and drab, verbose and quiet, fidgety and lethargic. All you with large visions and tender hearts. All you with small courage and tender fears. Bring your lisp and your stutter and your song. Bring your gravel and your drawl and your lilt. Bring your anger and your joy and your righteous indignation. Misfits and conformists and everyone in between, come into this time and be welcome. Come, bring who you are, bring where you've traveled, bring what you long for. Come, let us worship together.
I'm Reverend Kimberly Tomchek Carlson, and it is my honor to serve as the Minister of Religious Education. The story I have for you today is called The Big Umbrella, and it's by Amy June Bates. By the front door, there is an umbrella. It is big. It is a big, friendly umbrella. It likes to help. It likes to spread its arms wide. It loves to give shelter. It loves to gather people in. It doesn't matter if you're tall or hairy or plaid. It doesn't matter how many legs you have. some people worry that there won't be enough room under the big umbrella. But the amazing thing is, there is. There is always room. The end.
Please join me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, sacred source. On this day, one of the coldest days of the year, at a time in our history when we cannot even gather as a community to huddle together for warmth and moral support, connect us across the miles, connect us across the internet cables, ignite our hearts with faith and hope, weave us together in beloved community. This is a difficult time for many of us. May all the parents, teachers, and young people trying to do the impossible this year with school and everything else give themselves and one another a break. May they know compassion. May those who are wounded or sick, perhaps with COVID-19, or have a loved one who is, be blessed with healing, wellness, recovery, and comfort. May all those who have lost someone to COVID-19 this year, or for any other reason, know that they are not alone. Know that we are beaming our love and caring support right out to you now. May all those experiencing poverty, homelessness, job loss, or economic despair receive this day what they need. May all those who must travel, work, or otherwise go out in these temperatures be safe and stay warm. Spirit of life, sacred source, on this, the one of the coldest days of the year, on a day dedicated to love, let us each practice self-care, be loving to ourselves. Let us each remember that your name for us is beloved, and your name for our neighbor is also beloved. May we be held in this truth. May we be held in love. May we be an instrument of loving kindness. May this be so. Amen. And blessed be.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Gibson and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. I'll also be in at the coffee hour, so feel free to connect and say hello. By nature, I'm an introvert. It isn't that I don't like mixing or even public speaking. It's just that introverts find social encounters drain their batteries some. So while an extrovert may get energized by social gatherings, at the end of the day, I'd find them exhausting. Ironically, in some ways, for my working life, I was a university professor, which involved a lot of classroom discussion and feedback. Again, it isn't that I couldn't do it, but it took conscious effort, and I'd much prefer quiet contemplation. When we moved to Milwaukee some 25 years ago, my wife and I looked around for a church, and frankly, we were most concerned about childhood religious education. Still, when we found First UU, I was enchanted by the fact that I could simply sit and listen. I could take the time to hear honest but demanding readings, and hear from some really fascinating people. Pivotal in my choice to join as a member were my discussions with Kathy and Ricky Thompson, among others. I suspect they didn't realize those conversations were necessarily that profound, but along the way they let me know that I was approaching membership from a traditional religious institutional perspective that I needed to let go. UUs weren't creedal, so I didn't have to attest to things I found hard to believe. For instance, I didn't have to subscribe to the view that there would be judgment for an afterlife based on a celestial register where not only my deeds but my every thought had been recorded and assessed with a very real possibility, in my case, of eternal damnation. All the church encouraged was for individuals to find what was valid and true for themselves from the insights and accounts of spiritual journeys. Moreover, membership wasn't transactional. If I considered it payments for services rendered, I was just wrong-headed. Instead, they suggested, I should think what it means to be a member of a community. That is, the door was open, the feast prepared, and I was welcome to visit, interact, or embrace as I saw fit. The hospitality model is appropriate here, I think. In ancient Greece and in Arabian customs, for example, hosting is a moral obligation. You invite the person in, but do not question where they're from or place any expectations on them. You share your best and protect them, just as medieval monks did when they created hospitals for weary pilgrims. There are no entrance fees or demands on the guest. This all sounds a bit rosy. In fact, it hasn't been. To explain, let me contrast my UU experience to my first visit to the heart of the American South. I was an exchange student and went traveling during my Christmas break. I enjoyed meeting people along the way and was sometimes invited to bars, perhaps as I was something of a curiosity, as I was English and folks liked to talk about the Queen and Masterpiece Theatre. But as an outsider, I had a moral blind spot. I didn't see racism, I didn't see sexism or homophobia, and that isn't so surprising. As a straight white male, I wasn't exposed to these wrongs directly. In fact, couldn't see that I was being privileged. It all seemed natural and normal. The link that I want to make is that my welcome to the UU community has not always been passive or comforting. When I came to the UU table, to be sure, a friendly welcome was extended. On reflection, though, it was the same welcome that was extended to all. I was no more special than any other individual walking through the door. And recognizing that, perhaps I was subtly invited to hang my heteronormative and white privileges outside with my coat. Similarly, to follow through with the Arabian analogy, there were other travelers who'd been given hospitality, and some of them were not like me. It would not be a comfortable and comforting echo chamber where I could cloak myself in my privilege, but a table with lively conversation that confronted my values and invited me to give principled defenses for what I believed. Conceptually and in person, I sat at a diverse UU table. I'm still an introvert. I still prefer to listen. And it seems to me that's okay as long as it comes with empathy. It has been said that the best hospitality is understanding. I'm familiar with what it is to be an old white male, and I know how easy it is to surround yourself with like-minded people and avoid the conflict of dissonance, and facing up to that is often a challenge for me. Still, my experience with First Church prompts me to think it is possible and imperative in these times of turbulence. I appreciate sharing my thoughts, and of course, you are welcome.
Hi, I'm here. I'm not going out today again, so I'm still in my pajamas. And I'm remembering the very first day I crossed the threshold of the Unitarian Church as musical director 30 years ago. And I can remember, like it was yesterday, the very first hymn I ever played. It's one of our favorites. We're going to sit at the welcome table. Now, it seems like that hymn is very exuberant and celebratory to sing on a day like this when there's so much going on outside of our doors. But it's important to remember that it's an African-American spiritual that grew out of the experience of slavery, and the words were adapted during the Civil Rights Movement to be, we're going to sit at the freedom table. So it speaks directly to the reality of being excluded from freedom and justice, and it's a perfect song to sing today. And also, there's the added weight of singing it at home, alone, and feeling isolated and kind of helpless. But, as the song says over and over, one of these days. We're gonna sit at the welcome table. We're gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days, hallelujah. We're gonna sit at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. All kinds of people around that table. All kinds of people around that table one of these days, hallelujah. All kinds of people around that table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Come on, Kari, put some sugar in my coffee. No fancy style at the welcome table. No fancy style at the welcome table one of these days, hallelujah. No fancy style at the welcome table. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days. Gonna sit at the welcome table one of these days.
Alice Walker's mid-20th century short story, The Welcome Table, calls back to the old African-American spiritual of nearly the same name, I'm Gonna Sit at the Welcome Table. The song was originally sung by enslaved Americans who were not allowed to sit and eat at the master's table, and it was popularized during the Civil Rights Movement as one of the freedom songs and anthems of the mid-20th century. The story is about an old Black woman who gets up on a Sunday morning, puts her best clothes on, and walks to church. But instead of walking to her Black church, she walks to the white church in town. The white folks are beside themselves when she comes in and sits down that morning. The church ladies start to murmur. The ushers are in a tizzy, and the pastor himself goes up to her and says in her ear, "Auntie, you know this is not your church, right?" But the woman stays, silent, still, and strong. Eventually, the white women of the church convince their husbands to physically remove the Black woman from the sanctuary, and they do so. She's kicked out, left in the cold, and the white people go back to their business as usual, singing, praising God, and listening to the preacher talk about the promise of God's love. But here's the twist. Outside in the cold that morning, the old woman sees Jesus walking towards her down the road. She is filled with joy, and a huge smile comes over her face, and she takes off and follows Jesus down the road with gladness in her heart. I chose this story for us this morning because it invites us into the complicated concept of the welcome table as a metaphor for the beloved community. Specifically, it invites us to consider where the welcome table is set, where the feast is located, where the beloved community itself is experienced. Was it inside the church for the white folks that morning? Where was it for the black woman? Where is it for us today? And then there is the question of when. When will the welcome table be laid? When will we feast? Perhaps here and now? Or, as the old hymn suggests, perhaps it will be someday, at some distant date in the future, on some yet unknown great day. Or perhaps the answer lies within the tension between the two. As Unitarian Universalists, many of us try to answer these questions of where and when the welcome table of beloved community will be set with an affirmation of the here and now. We don't usually look to someday or somewhere else, but we look around. We see what we can do right now in this moment to expand our welcome and build beloved community. Theologians would call this a radically realized eschatology, a philosophy that the final destiny of humankind and all souls is here, right here on earth. Many of us, trusting this, set the table wide and warmly welcome in all who seek and come to our doors. We, in fact, work very hard to manifest the beloved community in real time. All are welcome, we like to say. But is it true? Is it true? I suspect I don't have to tell you that we have a long history of racial tension in our movement, and unfortunately, some people have historically been more welcome than others. Now, I, for one, have always felt very welcome in every UU space that I've ever been. I've been a Unitarian Universalist my whole life. I grew up in the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Duluth, Minnesota. I stayed active in our movement as a young adult in the Twin Cities. And then I was involved in many different congregations when I was living in the Boston area during my years of theological school and ministerial formation. Everywhere I went in the UU world, I felt at home. No matter the location, no matter the circumstances, I never had to question my belonging or my right to be there. Because I fit the mold. I fit the mold. I am a white, cisgender, middle-class, liberal, religious, pluralist, lifelong UU. I can go to just about any UU space, trust that the table has been set for me, have a comfortable experience, and enjoy the company of people like me in a culture that I am familiar with. This is not the case for people of color and for people from different class backgrounds who come to visit our congregations. Maybe it's not overt or obvious. We don't, after all, engage in extreme versions of hostility like the characters do in Alice Walker's story, no. But somehow, despite our best intentions, we haven't quite figured out how to say all are welcome and really mean it. A Latinx man who just joined the congregation that I currently serve in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, told me a few days ago that he literally felt a chill when he came to the church for the first time. Nobody talked to him. A former colleague of mine at the UU Urban Ministry in Boston, an African American Christian woman, recently told me with a heavy sigh that after being asked to pray in a UU setting, she was immediately rebuked. "We don't pray like that," a white woman told her. And my wife, who grew up in Appalachia, felt right at home in her home congregation of Charleston, West Virginia. But when she moved to New England, she received a cold reception in our congregations and felt out of place. Maybe it was her accent. Maybe it was just too much for people to bridge a class divide like that in our churches. These stories, each one of them and countless more, break my heart. The movement that I love and have committed my whole life to, the movement which likes to think of itself as having the biggest, widest welcome table of all, is still struggling with this concept. We're still struggling to live into this ideal. And in particular, we're still struggling to welcome people on the margins, people of color, indigenous people, people experiencing poverty, transgender people, queer people, and others. How extraordinary it is that we trust in the possibility of beloved community within our lifetimes. That radically realized eschatology is extraordinary. But we are not there yet. It is still not now. And I know we all want to change this. I know we all want to live up to what our UUA president, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, always tells us, that no one is outside the circle of love. So how do we get there, beloveds? How do we do this? One idea is to start getting serious about radical hospitality and sincerely embodying it in all we do. Radical hospitality is the simple concept of people and communities welcoming those who are not like themselves and expecting nothing in exchange or in return for offering this welcome. In their book, Radical Hospitality, Benedict's Way of Love, Father Daniel Holman and Lonnie Collins Pratt explain it this way. Rather than viewing any person in terms of how they benefit us, radical hospitality means accepting the person with no thought of personal benefit. Instead of seeking persons who will support the congregation, actively seek persons who need the support of the congregation. To become hospitable means finding ways to welcome the marginalized, forgotten, and misunderstood among us. Radical hospitality, of course, is rooted in that most ancient of religious concepts, that of welcoming the stranger. You know it. I know you do. There are stories about it in the Hebrew scriptures, the Christian scriptures, the Quran, and many other religious traditions and scriptures. The common theme across these stories of welcoming the stranger is that often the stranger is revealed later to actually be God or an angel, and the moral of the story is that each encounter with a stranger is actually an opportunity to encounter the holy, to touch the sacred, to be transformed by love. When we practice radical hospitality and welcome the stranger in our UU congregations, we are blessed beyond our imaginings. But it's not easy. Radical hospitality involves discomfort and risk and faith and patience. And lucky for me, it is a teachable skill. You can learn how to practice radical hospitality. You see, once when I was 25 years old and I was serving as the director of religious education in one of our congregations, we were hosting a pancake breakfast for the religious education program. Admission was $5. I was upstairs taking money and sending everyone downstairs to the fellowship hall to eat, when a homeless man appeared in line and said he didn't have any money, but he wondered if he could eat with us. And I, with no excuse for my bad behavior other than youth and ignorance, froze. I don't know, I said. Let me check. I went downstairs and asked the volunteer in charge of cooking that morning. I said, would it be okay if this man came in to have a meal? Of course, she exclaimed. There's enough for everyone. So I went back upstairs, apologized, showed him the buffet table, and the volunteer loaded his plate up with as much food as he wanted, and he sat down to enjoy a good meal and good conversation. I'm not particularly proud of this story. Feels strange a little bit telling it now, but I wanted to be honest. Radical hospitality is not easy. We all make mistakes, and we can all learn and get better at it. Our congregations can be a learning ground and a place for us to practice radical hospitality, a place for us to rehearse for the beloved community. I no doubt made that man feel unwelcome and uncomfortable while I was tripping all over myself and my anxieties and uncertainties that day. I'll never know if he forgave me, I suppose, but I do know that the experience changed my life and my perspective. The woman who explained to me that, yes, of course, we had enough food for everyone, was my teacher in that moment. She did not shame me for my actions. She was kind and loving. She invited me to be more generous, not by scolding me or explaining anything to me, but just by simply modeling radical hospitality right there in that moment. This is the role of the church, to provide a place for us to practice being the beloved community, to show us glimmers of it when we sometimes get it right, and to teach us how to do better when we fall short. In my ministry now, I take all the things I have learned over the years about who is welcome and who is not, and I work with my congregation to practice radical hospitality at every turn. We are learning to see people as they are, not as we wish them to be. We are learning to listen to the voices of the marginalized with compassion and love. We are learning to center their voices and decenter whiteness. We are striving to spend more time getting to know who new people are rather than telling them about who we are. It's a work in progress, yes, but with practice, intention, and devotion, it can become a way of life. It can become a way of being. As Father Homan and Pratt say, in genuine hospitality, we work to make our entire existence a welcoming table, a place prepared for others to be at ease, to receive from us comfort and strength. Hospitality teaches me to work at becoming someone who is easy to be with, either as a guest or host. Hospitality becomes a way of life as we become more open. It will not happen without preparation and unless you intend it to happen. When we speak of preparing a table, we refer to the intention and the work of making space for another human being. The Black woman in Alice Walker's story, the homeless man in mine, the countless people who have come and gone from our congregations, having had a less than welcoming experience, need us to prepare a bigger table, need us to do better and to make room at the table for them. So let's see if we can take up this challenge. With kindness and compassion, let's see if we can embody radical hospitality in all we do. Let's see if we can widen our welcome. After all, Unitarian Universalism is a life-saving faith. Unitarian Universalism is a life-transforming faith. It is a generous faith that gives us the opportunity to practice, to listen, and to go deeper. And if all goes well, it can offer us a glimmer of that beloved community which is not now and yet shall be. May this be so. May we be the ones to make it so.
Welcome, 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 Maria Sonia. Welcome, 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 let us all rejoice today. Bring your sorrows and tomorrows, let our hearts now gather near. After grieving or receiving, everyone has honor here. Welcome, 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 Maria Sonia. Welcome, 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 Lord, in all you do, we pray. Star and moon may show your way, o'er a sun known as Christ, mind and soul must one obey. May your light guide you alway. Welcome, 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 Maria Sonia. Welcome, 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 let us all rejoice today. Bring your sorrows and tomorrows, let our hearts now gather near. After grieving or receiving, everyone has honor here. Welcome, 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 Maria Sonia. Welcome, 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 Lord, in all you do, we pray.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for your generosity. Pledges are the core of our church's spiritual practice of generosity. We are also grateful for additional gifts and thank the folks out there who are appreciating this online ministry and supporting it by texting 73256 with the message "Give to UU" or giving on our website. Your gifts help us to continue to provide this ministry. We also share the plate with an organization each month. In February, Star King School for the Ministry is our Share the Plate recipient. Operating as a school for the ministry since 1904, Star King's mission is to educate people for Unitarian Universalist ministry and for progressive religious leadership in society. By investing as a congregation in Unitarian Universalist theological education, we support students who minister within our tradition and beyond. We also help sustain our UU institutions that serve both as repositories for our UU traditions and as incubators for our future as a faith movement. To give, please go to the Star King website. You can see all these options on your screen now, and they will live on in the YouTube comments section of this video after worship is over. Thank you so much for giving right now or when you come back later. Your support keeps us and our community partners going. Thank you.
Each one of us yearns for beloved community, some place where we will be seen and known and called by name at some time when we will be whole and blessed and deeply connected. So let us offer this gift to one another in our congregations. It won't be perfect, but with practice, we will get better and better at it. Let us be generous with one another. It will test our patience, but it will be worth it. Let us set a welcome table for one another and for all. And then let us make the welcome wider still. Let us make known, even for just a moment, the promise of beloved community. May this be so. Amen, and blessed be.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah.